They said no man could survive a summer noon in Dusty Ridge, where the air shimmered like glass and even the buzzards hid from the sun. But that day, Deputy Luke Miller rode through the heat with his German Shepherd Ranger, shadows long and breath thin as ash. Behind them, silence. Ahead, trouble waiting. At the heart of town, a single shot broke the stillness, sharp as the crack of fate. Ranger moved first, shielding his partner from the ambush meant to end them both. And through the haze of dust and gunpowder, a stranger stepped from the light. A lone drifter named Clay Bennett, his coat scorched by miles and eyes calm as storm glass. That was the moment justice found its spark again in the dying West. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. And if this story of courage and loyalty stirs your heart, please subscribe and join our campfire of tales from the old frontier. The summer sun burned mercilessly over Dusty Ridge, a small frontier town baked into the red earth of the Arizona Territory. The air shimmered with heat, the horizon rippling like molten glass. Dust clung to everything, boots, windows, even prayers. The few wooden buildings leaned into the wind as if too tired to stand straight. Horses drooped under the weight of the day, and the creak of the saloon sign was the only thing brave enough to challenge the silence. Out here, mercy was a myth the desert had long forgotten. Deputy Luke Miller rode slowly down Main Street, one hand resting on the worn grip of his Colt, the other holding the reins with lazy confidence. He was 27, tall and sinewy, the kind of lean that came from living more on grit than on bread. His face bore the hard plains of a man carved by sun and wind, sharp cheekbones, a square jaw, and eyes the color of storm clouds that had forgotten how to rain. His dark blonde hair, once neat, now hung over his brow, plastered with sweat. Luke was born in Dusty Ridge, raised by a blacksmith father who died under a collapsed mine roof when Luke was 15. Since then, he'd worn a quiet toughness, a man who didn't waste words because the desert took too many already. At his side trotted Ranger, a 4-year-old German Shepherd with a coat of black and tan and a gait like rolling thunder. His fur shimmered in the heat, his breath steady, eyes always fixed forward. Ranger had been Luke's partner since the Army days, back when Luke scouted for the cavalry along the Rio Grande. They'd seen ambushes, fires, and the kind of silence that follows after screams. The bond between them wasn't born of training. It was survival. Ranger trusted Luke the way a soul trusts its shadow. The street was quiet until Luke reined in near Sarah Holloway's cafe, a humble clapboard building with lace curtains yellowed by the sun. Sarah was at the doorway, a woman of 35, slender but strong, with copper-red hair pinned beneath a faded kerchief and freckles scattered across her sunburnt skin like flecks of cinnamon. She had once been the prettiest girl west of Prescott, but the years had taught her that beauty didn't stop bullets or bills. Still, she smiled when she saw Luke. "You look like you're chasing the sun again, Deputy," she called, her voice warm despite the heat. Luke tipped his hat. "Just keeping the peace, Miss Holloway. You seen a man come by? Gray hat, rough beard, smelled like whiskey, and bad news." Sarah frowned, wiping her hands on her apron. "He bought a coffee an hour ago, kept glancing toward the alley like the shadows owed him money." Luke's eyes narrowed. "That's him." He dismounted, giving Ranger a quiet hand signal. The dog slipped into alert stance, tail low, head forward. Together they moved along the wall, each step measured, the sound of spurs muffled by the dust. The alley behind the cafe was narrow and reeked of old beer and horse. Sweat. A fly buzzed lazily, then vanished into the dry air. From the corner of his eye, Luke spotted movement. A man in a gray duster coat, shoulders hunched, hat brim low. His hands twitched near his belt, too tense for a drifter, too calm for a thief. Luke called out, "You there! Hands where I can see 'em!" The man didn't answer. Instead, a glint of metal flashed. Then the hissed cough of a suppressed rifle shattered the stillness. Ranger barked once, lunging forward. Luke dove behind a barrel, dust exploding around him. The shot had missed, but not by much. A second shot rang out, sharper, closer. Ranger darted ahead, teeth bared, eyes locked on the shooter. The gunfire came not from the stranger, but from above. Luke looked up to see a figure stepping out on a balcony of the Silver Spur Saloon, rifle glinting in the sun. The shooter was deliberate, professional. This wasn't a back alley thug. This was a setup. Luke returned fire, the sound raw and deafening. The first bullet chipped splinters from the balcony rail. The second found wood instead of flesh. Then Ranger leapt, crashing into the shooter's partner emerging from the shadows. There was a muffled cry, a curse, and a yelp. "Ranger!" Luke shouted, sprinting forward. His boots slipped on the blood-stained dust. The dog was down, chest heaving, a dark stain spreading through his fur. Luke's breath caught, rage and fear colliding in his chest. From the end of the alley, another man stepped out, tall and broad-shouldered, his sheriff's badge catching the light. Marcus Rourke, newly appointed town sheriff, was a handsome man in the way a rattlesnake was beautiful, sleek, polished, and deadly. His dark hair was slicked back, his mustache trimmed too neat for honest work. His smile was the kind that never reached his eyes. "Well, well, Deputy Miller," he drawled, voice smooth as oil. "Seems you've been poking around in business above your pay grade." Luke's hand tightened around his gun, but his mind spun. Rourke's men? Ambush. It didn't make sense, unless the law itself had turned crooked. Then, before either could move, a shadow dropped from above. A man landed between them, dust exploding around his boots. He was older, maybe mid-30s, dressed in a long canvas trail coat, faded by sun and travel. His face was all angles and scars, a day's stubble shadowing a square jaw. His eyes, cold steel gray, carried the weight of too many deserts and too many graves. "Name's Clay Bennett," he said calmly, cocking his revolver. "I reckon you boys are making too much noise for a peaceful town." Rourke's smile faded. "You just made a bad choice, friend." Clay's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "Story of my life." The sound came first, a train whistle, long and shrill, slicing through the air. The ground trembled as the Santa Fe freight roared past the back edge of town, its smoke pouring into the alley like a storm cloud. The world turned to ash and steam, the sun drowned in soot. When the smoke cleared, Luke found himself staring down the barrel of a gun. Cold steel pressed to his forehead, the trigger half drawn, and Marcus Rourke's finger steady as a snake poised to strike. The smell of sage and blood hung in the small wooden room like ghosts unwilling to leave. The shutters were closed to the glare outside, but light still leaked through the cracks, painting the floorboards in stripes of fire. On the rough-hewn table lay Ranger, his tan and black fur matted with dust and blood. His chest rose and fell unevenly, the rhythm of a heart refusing to quit. Dr. Eleanor Harris moved with quiet authority around the table, her gray-streaked braid brushing against the collar of her faded white blouse. She was in her late 50s, tall and broad-shouldered, the kind of woman who had once wrangled horses before she wrangled pain. Her eyes, pale green and steady, had seen too many creatures fight for their last breath. She cleaned Ranger's wound with a precision born from loss. Her own husband had bled out on a battlefield she could not reach in time. Since then, she'd made it her life's work to keep others from meeting the same end. "Bullet missed the lung," she said, voice low but firm. "But the shoulder's torn clean through. He'll live, Luke, but his working days are over." Luke Miller stood near the doorway, his hat clutched in both hands, sweat darkening the brim. His face looked older under the dim lamplight, the storm in his eyes held back by sheer will. "You mean he won't fight again?" Eleanor paused, meeting his gaze. "I mean, you'll have to teach him to rest. Some battles are meant to be survived, not fought." The words hit Luke harder than the gunfire had. Ranger had been more than a partner. He was a reminder that loyalty could still exist in a world that bartered everything else. He knelt beside the table, resting a hand gently on the dog's head. "You did good, boy," he whispered. Ranger's tail thumped weakly, his amber eyes half open, trusting, loyal to the end. The door creaked open and Marcus Rourke entered, his polished boots tapping against the wood. He looked out of place in the rough clinic, too clean, too deliberate. His black vest clung tight to his chest, his silver watch chain glinting as he adjusted his cufflinks. The false charm on his lips barely covered the chill behind his words. "Tragic business," he drawled. "But then again, reckless men find reckless trouble." Luke's jaw tightened. "With respect, Sheriff, those men had military rifles and silencers. That's not local trouble." Rourke's smile was all teeth. "Maybe. Or maybe my deputy got jumpy and fired first. Hard to tell once the dust clears." He pulled a folded paper from his pocket, letting it drop on the table beside the bloodied bandages. "You're on leave, Miller. Effective immediately. Until I finish my investigation." Luke's fists clenched, but Eleanor's voice cut through. "He's not fit to fight, Marcus. Neither of them are. Let them heal." Rourke tipped his hat, that oily grin never wavering. "Of course, Doctor. I'm all heart." Then, without another word, He turned and left, boots echoing down the porch. Clay Bennett appeared at the threshold moments later, tall and silent as a shadow. The late afternoon sun framed him, catching the dust motes that swirled like smoke around his coat. "That man doesn't walk like law," he said quietly. Eleanor looked him over, assessing. "And you don't talk like a stranger." Clay smirked faintly. "Depends on which side of the badge you're standing." Luke straightened. "You saved our hides back there. I didn't get the chance to thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Clay said, pulling a small silver coin from his pocket. The edge was etched with a hawk clutching a key, an old cavalry insignia, though altered. "You ever want to know who really runs Dusty Ridge? Come to warehouse number 3 by the Santa Fe line. After sundown, don't bring your badge." Luke took the coin, its weight cold and unnatural. Before he could ask more, Clay tipped his hat to Eleanor and stepped out into the dying light. For a long while, the room was silent except for Ranger's labored breathing. Eleanor moved to the shelves above the window, where bundles of sage and lavender hung upside down, filling the air with the sharp scent of summer and medicine. "Take him home, Luke," she said softly. "And be careful who you trust. The desert's got ears." Outside, the air was heavy with the smell of rain that never came. Luke carried Ranger gently, the dog's weight, both comfort and burden. The sun was sinking, turning the red hills to embers. Across the street, Sarah Holloway stood on her porch, shading her eyes. She waved hesitantly, concern written across her freckled face. Luke nodded, but didn't stop. He had no words left. As he turned the corner toward his small house at the edge of town, a black carriage stood parked half in shadow, its wheels clean despite the dust. The curtains were drawn tight. A thin man in a bowler hat sat atop the driver's seat, smoking a cigar that smelled of imported tobacco, too fine for Dusty Ridge. Luke felt a chill crawl down his spine, even in the heat. He shifted Ranger's weight and kept walking. Behind him, the carriage door creaked open. A gloved hand, slender, clad in black leather, held something out into the fading light. A new dog collar, sleek, polished, its brass buckle shining like gold. When Luke finally reached his porch and laid Ranger down, the dog stirred restlessly, pawing at his neck. Luke froze. His breath caught. Around Ranger's throat gleamed the same collar, and he had no memory of fastening it. The desert wind rose suddenly, carrying the scent of sage and metal. Somewhere behind him, the black carriage wheels began to turn, rolling slow, silent, and certain down the empty street. By mid-morning, Dusty Creek shimmered like a mirage built out of exhaustion. The town squatted low against the horizon, a cluster of wooden bones and rusted nails stubbornly pretending to be civilization. The sun was merciless, a white coin nailed to a copper sky, and the air itself seemed to hum with the sound of boiling silence. Wind rolled in slow spirals, carrying grit fine enough to scrape paint and pride alike. The Larkspur Cookhouse stood at the edge of it all, newly washed, patched, and still smelling faintly of lye and effort. The wooden sign outside had been repainted by Jack Carter himself. Uneven letters, honest but imperfect, reading, "Open, one morning at a time." Jack stood beneath it, shoulders squared in the brightness. His white shirt was rolled at the sleeves, revealing forearms the color of old oak, ropey with muscle and the faint web of old scars. His face looked both younger and older in the daylight, youth in the angles, age in the eyes. Those eyes, blue as tin cooled in shade, carried the stillness of someone who had seen too much motion. Beneath the brim of his sweat-stained hat, a few strands of brown hair, already kissed gray, stuck to his temple. When he smiled, which wasn't often, one corner of his mouth lifted first as if testing whether joy was safe to wear again. Beside him lounged Rex, the German shepherd, panting lightly. The dog's fur caught sunlight like silver dust, his chest broad and proud, his tail sweeping the ground lazily in time with the occasional buzz of a fly. He was the kind of animal that made strangers straighten their posture without realizing why, his gaze calm but measuring, like he understood the moral weight of footsteps. If Jack was the bones of the place, Rex was the heartbeat. The bell above the door swayed gently as the first customers approached from the street. The couple came slowly, hand in hand, shadows short and deliberate beneath the glare. Ed and Edna Parsons had lived in Dusty Creek longer than the railroad itself. Ed was tall but bent now, his spine curving under decades of labor. His face was cut from sandstone, sharp nose, jaw square as a fence post, beard white and wiry. His wife Edna was short, a round woman with hair the color of storm clouds and skin soft as old parchment, her eyes bright with the kind of humor only survivors carry. She wore a faded blue dress and a straw hat crowned with wilted silk daisies that seemed to keep blooming out of stubbornness. "Well, I'll be damned," Ed said, squinting at the sign. "Didn't think I'd see this door open again." His voice had the rasp of tobacco and desert wind. "Language, dear," Edna chided, though she was smiling. "I like the smell. Reminds me of the year this place still had color." Jack tipped his hat politely. "Coffee's hot, pancakes are trying their best. Can't promise more than that." Ed chuckled. "After 40 years of marriage, that's all a man needs to promise." They took a booth by the window, and Rex, ever the diplomat, stationed himself nearby, tail thumping once in approval. Jack moved behind the counter, his motions slow but sure. The way men work when they've decided to rebuild faith, not just furniture. He poured the coffee, dark, smoky, slightly bitter, and the smell rolled through the room like a hymn without words. The next arrival was Gus Riley, a long-haul driver whose rig had more dents than sense. Gus was in his mid-40s, thick-set, with forearms covered in grease and a face tanned into permanence. His sandy hair stuck out from under a trucker's cap, and his beard came in patches like the terrain outside town. His eyes, though, were clear, gray, honest, and tired in a way that made even strangers feel safe sitting near him. He walked with the easy heaviness of a man who'd spent too long talking only to road signs. "Coffee?" Jack asked. "Only if it's stronger than my regrets," Gus said, voice dry as leather. Jack smirked, sliding a mug across the counter. "Then it'll do." Gus ate his pancakes with the reverence of a man who remembered hunger too well. When he finished, he left a crumpled 10 on the counter. More than enough. "You fed me," he said simply, and walked out into the glare. The door shut, the bell chimed once, and silence filled the gap he left. It didn't last long. The bell rang again, soft but clear, and a young woman stepped inside. She paused in the doorway, blinking against the dimness after the brutal light outside. Her name, though Jack didn't know it yet, was Clara Haynes. She couldn't have been older than 26, maybe 27, though sorrow added years around her eyes. Her skin was pale, kissed pink where the sun had found it. Her hair, the color of chestnuts, was pinned messily beneath a straw hat, and her dress, a simple gray cotton, hung like it belonged to a gentler season. She moved with the hesitant grace of someone still learning to trust her own weight. Jack noticed the way her fingers brushed the door frame as she entered, as if asking permission. "Seat yourself anywhere," he said softly. She nodded, choosing the booth nearest the window. Rex approached her side, tail low, head tilted in quiet curiosity. Clara smiled faintly. "You don't mind dogs, do you?" Jack asked. "Not at all," she whispered, voice soft as wind through linen. "My father had one just like him, and a bell, too. Looked just like that one over your door." Jack glanced toward the bronze-green bell. It caught the sun and flashed once, like a wink from another world. "Your father run a diner?" he asked. "He did," she said, eyes distant. "Said the bell woke the town each morning. He'd ring it 3 times before cooking started." Her lips trembled, a smile caught halfway between memory and ache. "He passed 2 summers ago. Sometimes, when the wind blows right, I swear I still hear it." Rex pressed his head gently against her knee, as if to remind her that some echoes learned to take shape again. Clara exhaled shakily, brushing his fur. The room felt softer for a moment, like time had paused to listen. Then it happened. The bell above the door rang 3 clear tones, perfect in rhythm. No wind, no hand near it. Just sound, pure, crystalline, and impossibly alive. Jack froze, the coffee pot hovering in midair. The Eds turned from their booth, Edna crossing herself without thinking. Rex stood, ears pricked, eyes bright as amber fire. Clara looked up slowly, tears glinting. "That sound," she whispered. "That's him. My father used to say butter smells like memory." She reached into her small satchel, pulled a folded scrap of paper, and set it on the counter before leaving. When Jack opened it later, her neat handwriting read, "Butter smells like memory." The bell gave one final chime as she stepped into the sun. Inside, laughter and clinking cutlery returned like rain on dry earth. Jack looked toward the old photograph of Nora on the wall, and for a heartbeat, through the shimmer of heat, he thought he saw her smile, as though the desert itself had remembered color. The night over Santa Fe Station shimmered with a dry, electric heat. The sky above the desert rails looked bruised, deep violet streaked with the last dying red of sunset. The sand still burned beneath boots even after dark, and every sound, the groan of the rails, the cry of a coyote, the whine of a distant telegraph, seemed sharper, more watchful. The freight yard itself stretched like a skeleton of iron and steam, its warehouses looming in silence except for the slow, rhythmic hiss of the cooling locomotives. Luke Miller stood behind a stack of wooden crates near warehouse number 3, his coat pulled tight, a wide-brimmed hat shadowing his face. Sweat traced slow paths down his temple despite the night air. His revolver was heavy at his side, and his free hand rested on Ranger's collar, a new one, freshly cut from raw leather after Clay had burned the last to ashes. The dog sat low, tense, muscles rippling under his dark fur, his golden eyes alert. He was healing, but the limp in his right leg remained, making each movement deliberate, almost regal. Clay Bennett crouched on the roof of a nearby boxcar, his silhouette blending into the dark. He was dressed in a faded brown duster and a wide hat, his rifle braced on the ridge of the rail car. A small mechanical camera, built from scavenged parts, wrapped in cloth to mute its clicks, sat beside him. His voice carried softly through the heat. "Remember, Luke, we bait the trap, then let the fox walk into it. Don't shoot unless you have to." Luke nodded, whispering back toward the empty shadows. "And if the fox brings friends, then," Clay said, a wry smile ghosting his voice, "we make new graves." The plan was simple. Too simple, Luke thought. Spread a whisper among Rourke's men that a ledger of blackmail and smuggling payments was hidden inside Ranger's old K9 vest, tucked away in warehouse number 3. The rumor had been planted by Tommy Briggs, a nervous stable hand who owed Luke a favor. Tommy was 20, skinny as a fence post, with straw-colored hair and a permanent sunburn. He believed in Luke because Luke once pulled him from a saloon brawl before Rourke's deputies could teach him a lesson. Now he'd risked everything to carry the lie into the right ears. By midnight, the air inside the freight yard had gone still, too still. The wind had dropped, and the smell of oil and hot steel clung thick. Then, faintly, Luke heard the click of a latch. A door opened at the far end of the warehouse. 2 lanterns flickered to life, swinging gently. Luke peered through a crack in the wall. Inside, Marcus Rourke entered first, his coat buttoned tight, a pistol gleaming in his hand. Behind him, another man followed, taller, thinner, his black suit immaculate, even in the desert grime. His face was smooth, almost too smooth, his dark hair slicked back to reveal sharp, calculated features. The lamplight caught his eyes, cold, pale gray, like metal under frost. That was Silas, Ward, the man Clay had warned about, the ghost who ran human lives like cattle through the freight lines, trading people the way others traded grain. His expression was calm, almost bored as he watched Rourke pace the floor. "You said it was here," Silas said quietly, his voice low and cultured, an accent that didn't belong to any part of the West. "Don't waste my time with ghost stories." "It's here," Rourke snapped, his composure cracking. He moved toward the stack of old uniforms in the corner, pulling one down. "That deputy hid it himself. I saw him. He—" Clay, watching through his scope, mouthed the words. "Got you." He pulled the lever on his camera. Click, freezing the image of the sheriff committing his own break-in. Luke watched, heart hammering. They had it. Proof. Rourke's corruption, Silas's presence, everything. He turned slightly toward Ranger, whispering, "We're done here, boy." Then somewhere in the dark, a whistle screamed, the long, haunting cry of the yardmaster's horn. Lights along the tracks flickered to life one by one. From the station loudspeaker came a barked voice. "Attention all patrols, be on the lookout for Deputy Luke Miller, wanted for treason and collusion with traffickers. Shoot on sight." Luke froze. The words hit him harder than a bullet. He looked up toward the roof, but Clay was already gone from view, melted into shadow. Inside the warehouse, Rourke's head snapped up, eyes narrowing. "He's here," he hissed. Lantern lights spilled out across the loading platform as men began to fan out. The air filled with the metallic clicks of guns being cocked. Luke ducked behind the crates, his pulse roaring in his ears. Ranger gave a low growl, ready to defend but trembling with fatigue. "Stay," Luke whispered. "Not this time." The yard became a maze of light and movement, search beams slicing across the night like knives. Luke crept along the edge of the platform, every step careful. He could see Silas now, standing still amid the chaos, his hands clasped behind his back, watching as though he were enjoying a show. His face betrayed no fear, no anger, only mild curiosity. And then a voice from the dark. "Luke Miller, drop your weapon!" The beams found him. 5 rifle barrels glinted in the night, pointed squarely at his chest. The officers fanned out in a semicircle, faces hidden under wide hats. Dust swirled around their boots. Luke slowly raised his hands, the revolver dangling from one finger. "You're making a mistake," he called out. Rourke stepped forward, smug and self-assured, badge catching the light. "No, Miller. The mistake was trusting you." Ranger stirred behind the crates. He had stayed quiet as long as he could, his instincts torn between command and devotion. Hearing Luke's voice break under strain was too much. With a hoarse bark, he stepped into the open, head low, teeth bared, standing between Luke and the rifles. Patrolman hesitated. The sight of the wounded German shepherd, loyal even in ruin, cut through the tension for only a heartbeat. Then one of the rifles cocked louder than the rest. "Ranger, no!" Luke shouted. The floodlights from the tower swung, blinding them all. For a moment, everything froze in white. Silas turned away, unhurried, while Rourke's smile returned, sharper than ever. The sun rose angry that morning, blazing red over the desert horizon like molten copper. The Santa Fe freight train rumbled along the tracks, each wheel shrieking against the rails as if the metal itself wanted to tear free. The heat shimmered around the moving cars, bending the air into ghostly mirages. Inside one of the last boxcars, Luke Miller crouched low among crates and chains, revolver drawn. The rhythmic clatter of the tracks filled his ears, each beat counting down to something inevitable. Across from him, Ranger lay pressed close to the floor, every muscle taut. His coat was matted with soot and sweat, and his right leg dragged when he shifted, but his eyes, sharp, amber, and alive, never left Luke's face. Even wounded, he was ready, always ready. A muffled groan broke through the noise. Luke turned. In the dim light filtering through the slats, he saw faces, 6 of them. People bound hand and foot with coarse hemp rope, lips cracked, eyes wide with fear. A woman whispered prayers. A young boy, no older than 12, stared blankly, his wrists raw. Luke cut the ropes one by one, his hands shaking not from fear, but fury. "You're free," he said hoarsely. "When we stop, you run. Don't look back." The lock outside the car screeched. Luke and Ranger froze. The door slid open with a groan, and sunlight poured in. A guard stepped up, rifle in hand. He was burly, scarred, with a tattoo of a serpent coiling up his forearm, a man built from violence and whiskey. Before he could shout, a shadow dropped behind him, a flash of movement, a dull crack. Clay Bennett. Clay's face was streaked with grime, his coat ripped from the earlier fight. A shallow cut ran along his jawline, but his eyes burned steady as ever. "They're moving faster than I thought," he said, yanking the guard's body out of the car. "We've got maybe 5 minutes before the bridge." Luke helped the captives to their feet, guiding them toward the door. "Bridge?" "The iron bridge over Devil's Hollow," Clay answered. "Silas rigged it. Said he'd rather burn the evidence than let anyone talk." The words struck like a hammer. Luke felt the ground tilt beneath him, though the train hadn't yet turned. He looked back at the freed passengers, men, women, a child clutching a broken doll. None of them deserved to die here. Clay kicked open the latch to the next car, revealing more cages, more chains. "He's moving people like cattle," Clay spat. "Every one of them sold twice before sunrise." Before Luke could respond, a shot rang out. The bullet clipped the doorframe beside his head. Rourke's voice followed, echoing down the corridor of the cars. "You two are stubborn sons of bitches, I'll give you that." Marcus Rourke was staggering along the train's walkway, hat gone, face cut and bleeding, the silver of his badge tarnished black with soot. His once perfect mustache was frayed, and his eyes glowed with feverish triumph. "You think you can ruin me? You think anyone will believe the word of a disgraced deputy and a washed-up soldier?" He raised his revolver, aiming straight at Luke. Ranger growled low, the sound rumbling like distant thunder. Then the train lurched, hard. A tunnel of wind and heat hit them as they emerged from the cut of the canyon. The iron bridge stretched ahead, black steel glinting under the sun, arching over a gorge so deep the river below looked like a crack in the earth. Clay cursed under his breath. "He's gonna blow it while we're still on." Luke looked back. The freed captives clung to the sides of the car, terrified. "Get them off this train!" he shouted. Clay nodded, sprinting toward the rear to release the coupling pins. The metal screamed as the cars separated, the freight jerking apart. Rourke advanced, his revolver unwavering. "You can't save them all, Miller. You never could. Pick one, your conscience or your dog." Luke's pulse hammered. The air stank of oil and fire. From ahead came another figure, Silas Ward, calm as ever, standing atop the next car with the detonator box in his hand. His black coat fluttered in the wind like the wings of a crow. "You never understood, Deputy," he called, voice smooth as glass. "The desert doesn't take sides. It only takes." "Silas!" Clay shouted from the rear car. "You're gonna kill your own cargo!" Silas smiled faintly. "Collateral." His thumb rested on the trigger. Rourke stepped closer to Luke, pressing the barrel to his back. "Choose, Miller. Save the innocents, or save your mutt." Ranger, hearing the threat, staggered forward, teeth bared. The train hit the bridge, the iron grating beneath them, rattling like chains. The wind screamed through the girders. Luke's mind splintered. The captives. Ranger, Clay shouting something he couldn't hear. Silas lifting the detonator. The seconds stretched. Every heartbeat a drum of dread. Then, a sound. A soft tick, tick, tick from somewhere beneath the rails. The bridge itself was alive, humming with death. Clay dove, grabbing Rourke's wrist. The gun went off, grazing Luke's shoulder. The shot startled Silas, but his finger twitched. The plunger pressed. The detonator hissed. Luke lunged, grabbing Ranger as the first explosion tore through the base of the bridge. A roar swallowed the world, metal screaming, fire blossoming into the sky. Clay's shout vanished into the thunder. For a moment, time folded into pure light. Then, silence. The sun blazed down on a sky filled with smoke. Half the bridge was gone. The train hung at the edge, teetering. Luke's hand still clutched Ranger's collar, his knuckles white, his breath ragged. Somewhere, distant but unmistakable, came the slow echo of ticking. One last fuse still burning. When the dust finally settled and the smoke drifted into heaven's wide silence, only the wind remained to tell their story. It whispered through the broken rails and over the scorched bridge, carrying the echo of courage, loyalty, and the faint rhythm of hearts that refused to yield. In that moment, as the sun pierced through the storm's last veil, Luke knelt beside Ranger, alive, battered, but breathing, and he understood. Miracles don't always come as thunder or fire. Sometimes they come as the steady heartbeat of a friend who won't let go, or as the unseen hand of God guiding you through the fire when your strength has burned away. Maybe that's what faith truly is, not waiting for heaven to speak, but believing it already has, in the loyalty of a dog, the mercy of a stranger, or the chance to stand up one more time when you should have fallen. If this story stirred something in your heart, if you believe that courage and kindness are still God's quiet miracles among us, share this story. Leave a comment below about where you're watching from, and subscribe to join our growing circle of faith beneath the wide, forgiving sky. May the Lord bless your home, guard your path, and remind you, through every trial and every sunrise, that no one walks alone.